Hey everyone, welcome to this week's reading of Shard of the Sun, picking up where we left off from last week, and we are on chapter 12. Farron paced back and forth across the room, his steps dragging as slow as time's passage. He was impatiently waiting for word from his apprentices. A knock at the door turned his attention from his dark thoughts. "Enter," he commanded. The door opened on silent hinges, and he was pleased to see that it was Vyas. The young man entered and shut the door behind him. Farron liked Vyas, as much as he could like another human being anyway. He was in his 20s, young and full of life. His hair was cut short, and the color of leaves after all life has left them. Were his powers not so weakened, Farron would have simply possessed one of his apprentices as he did ages ago. "Have you found it?" Vyas paused and thought how to best phrase the bad news. Farron was known for his angry outbursts. "We did find it," he answered. Farron nodded approvingly. "Let me have it," he said. Vyas shifted uneasily. "We do not have it in our possession," he informed. The master flinched involuntarily. And Farron looked confused. "Where is it?" he asked. Vyas cleared his throat. A man has it. He was staying at a house in Muirwood. We attempted to steal it from him in the night, but he wasn't at the house, so we took a woman who lived there as ransom." Farron's eyes glittered in the candlelight of the room. "Has he come forth to trade it for the woman?" Vyas asked. Vyas shook his head. "Why not?" Vyas opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He was not about to take the wrath for their master, uh, take the wrath of their master because his fellow apprentice had not done his task. "I think it is because the man doesn't know where to find us." Farron laid his forehead in his left hand. "And why would that be, exactly?" Vyas felt his skin begin to crawl under his master's scrutinizing gaze. He also felt power begin to pool around Farron, the air thrumming with energy. "I instructed the mute one to leave a note. It seems he forgot." Farron nodded. That one had been a nuisance for a long time now. Perhaps it was time to teach a lesson on failure. The man who has it is obviously a wizard. When he comes for the girl, we must crush him without mercy. The man is not a wizard. Farron's brow creased upward in disbelief. Then why do we not have it in our possession? His level of frustration was beginning to boil over into anger. "The object you seek seems to have given him powers. Muirwood was blazing with rumors of a man who had brought back the dead and healed the sick. When we realized the man was performing these miracles because of what he had, it was too late. We would not have been able to take it by force with him surrounded by the crowds of people who flocked to see him. So we attempted to steal it under the cover of night. There was one who came to the man known as the Necromancer. It appears she's helping him to come rescue the woman." Farron nodded at the mention of the Necromancer. He had heard of her, though she posed little threat to him. Still, why would she not take the shard for herself? The thought plagued his mind. "What then are you doing here, if you have not retrieved it yet?" Vyas hoped this news would be good enough to sate his master's wrath. "I came because I have other news. The magical shield over Ravendale has fallen." Were he not so old, Farron might have leapt about in excitement. The news invigorated him. "That is good news. You did well in returning to me. How did it fall? Have the warrior priests lost their powers?" Vyas shook his head. "From what I could gather, someone destroyed it." Farron was surprised to hear that. He was confident that there was no wizard stronger than he, and his attempt to bring down the shield ended horribly. Who was it? It couldn't have been Nidria. She isn't strong enough. No, it was not Nidria. A priest offered me some interesting information in exchange for his life. It seems a man who healed their dead master, came into town around the same time the barrier fell. It seems the shard's power are considerable, to say the least. Interesting, thought Farron. With power like that, he could do much more than heal his body. And this man is parading around healing people. What a waste. Is this man still in Ravendale? I don't believe so. The city was attacked by a large force of goblins. As I left the city, I passed a man on the road. It seemed odd to me that he was traveling from the direction of the city and had no signs of having been fighting, so I think he might be the one we're looking for." Farron thought about everything his apprentice told him. "When was this?" "4 days ago," Vyas answered, "though I was on horseback and he was on foot. There's no telling where he might be now. Also, the necromancer was not with him." "Interesting," muttered Farron. Was it possible he had killed the wide-eyed witch? He didn't know. Yet, if the shard could bring down the barrier, perhaps the man had killed the necromancer as well. Seek this man out and bring him to me. Do not come back until you have him. Bias bowed in obedience. He turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. What of the woman? He asked. Kill her, Farron said nonchalantly. Take her down to the dungeon and do it, Bias instructed. Lion bowed his head in submission and took Octavia by the arm and led her down to the lower part of the castle. As he guided her through the confusing maze of corridors, he considered how she had ceased her fighting. Perhaps she had given up hope. Liam frowned. This wasn't what he had signed up for. Bias had recruited him, lured him into an apprenticeship with promises of power and wealth. Liam had come to realize the cost of such things too late. His first mistake had cost him his voice. He remembered vividly how harshly Farron had disciplined him, and then he had commanded Bias to permanently silence him. His free hand involuntarily went to his neck. He pushed the thoughts to the back of his mind as they reached the main chamber of the dungeon. Lamb forced Octavia down to her knees and pushed her head onto a square-shaped flat surface. He grabbed an axe that hung from the wall and ran his fingers along the blade. It sliced right through his skin. A small drop of blood seeped out from the cut. He nodded his head in satisfaction and hefted the axe up with both hands, looking down at the woman. All of the fight may have gone from her, but she stared back at him unwaveringly. Her eyes said what she couldn't. They pleaded with him to spare her. Lamb sighed and lowered the axe. Who was he kidding? He was no murderer. He placed the axe back on the wall and helped Octavia up. He tried to think of what he could do with her. He couldn't just set her free to wander around the frozen lands of Urn alone. He led her to one of the cells in the darker area of the dungeon, and made sure she had some food and water, and locked her in the cell. He knew he couldn't keep her there indefinitely, but he couldn't kill her either. Liam sighed and headed back to the upper chambers, heavily burdened. All right, that's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with chapter 13. Hope you guys are enjoying the story, and we'll pick it up next week. Thanks for listening, guys.